This is Daniel and Revelation by Uriah Smith. Chapter 13, Persecuting Powers Part 3. When the application of Revelation 13:11 through 17 to the United States was first made, as early as the year 1850, these positions respecting a union of the churches and a grand Sunday movement were taken. But at that time, no sign appeared above or beneath, at home or abroad. No token was seen, no indication existed that such an issue would ever be made. But there was the prophecy, and that must stand. The United States government had given abundant evidence by its location, the time of its rise, the manner of its rise, and its apparent character, that it was the power symbolized by the two-horned beast. There could be no mistake in the conclusion that it was the very nation intended by that symbol. This being so, it must take the course and perform the acts foretold. But here were predictions which could be fulfilled by nothing less than the above-named movement respecting church and state, and the enforcement of the papal Sabbath as a mark of the beast. To take the position at that time that this government was to pursue such a policy and engage in such a work without any apparent probability in its favor was no small act of faith. On the other hand, to deny or ignore it while admitting the application of the symbol to this government would not be in accordance with either scripture or logic. The only course for the humble, confiding student of prophecy to pursue in such cases is to take the light as it is given and believe the prophecy in all its parts. So the stand was boldly taken. An open proclamation has been made from that day to this, that such a work would be seen in the United States. With every review of the argument, new features of strength have been discovered in the application, and amid a storm of scornful incredulity, we have watched the progress of events and awaited the hour of fulfillment. Meanwhile, spiritualism has astonished the world with its terrible progress and shown itself to be the wonder-working element which was to exist in connection with this power. This has mightily strengthened the force of the application. And now, within a few years past, what have we further seen? No less than the commencement of that very movement respecting the formation of the image and the enactment of Sunday laws which we have so long expected and which is to complete the prophecy and close the scene. The National Reform Movement. Reference has already been made to the movement to secure a union of the churches for the purpose of adding strength and influence to ecclesiastical movements in certain directions. And now a class of men is suddenly springing up all over the land whose souls are absorbed with the cognate idea of Sunday reform, and who have dedicated themselves, heads, hands, and pockets, to the carrying forward of this kindred movement. Organizations called Sabbath committees have been formed in various places and have labored zealously by means of books, tracts, speeches, and sermons to create a strong public sentiment in behalf of Sunday. Making slow progress through moral suasion, they seek a shorter path to the accomplishment of their purposes through political power. And why not? Christianity has become popular, and her professed adherents are numerous. Why not avail themselves of the power of the ballot to secure their ends? Reverend J.S. Smart, Methodist, in a published sermon on the political duties of Christian men and ministers, expresses a leading sentiment on this question when he says, "I claim that we have, and ought to have, just as much concern in the government of this country as any other men. We are the mass of the people. Virtue in this country is not weak. Her ranks are strong in numbers and invincible from the righteousness of her cause, invincible if united. Let not her ranks be broken by party names." In accordance with the logical development of these feelings, an association has been formed now called the National Reform Association, which has for its object the securing of legal enactments for religious institutions by means of such an amendment to the national constitution as shall place all Christian laws, institutions, and usages of the government on an undeniable legal basis in the fundamental law of the land. Here is the germ of religious revolution, the entering wedge of church and state. This movement originated at Xenia, Ohio, in February 1863, in a convention composed of 11 different religious denominations who assembled for prayer and conference. To be sure, the leaders in this movement disclaim vehemently any such purpose as a union of church and state, but a sentence now and then escapes them which reveals more than they intended. Thus, at a convention of this association in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Dr. Stevenson, one of these leaders, said, "Through the immense largesses it receives from corrupt politicians, the Roman Catholic Church is, practically, the established church of the city of New York. These favors are granted under the guise of a seeming friendliness to religion. We propose to put the substance for the shadow, to drive out the counterfeit by the more complete substitution of the true." There are several guess roads through which we may look for the intent of this language, but inasmuch as they all arrive at one conclusion, this conclusion is neither ambiguous nor doubtful. It is simply that the Protestant Church shall become really established, as the Roman Catholic now is practically. This is confirmed by the very next sentence, which reads, "What we propose is nothing of a sectarian character. It will give no branch of American Christians any advantage over any other." Professor Blanchard undertakes to give a definition of what they mean by a union of church and state as follows. But union of church and state is the selection by the nation of one church, the endowment of such a church, the appointment of its officers, and the oversight of its doctrines. For such a union none of us plead. To such a union we are all of us opposed. The reader is requested to mark this well. Here is given a definition of a union of church and state such as no one expects or fears, such in fact as is not possible in the existing state of the churches, and then a special plea is set up that they are opposed to a union of church and state. To such an impossible combination as they describe, they may safely write themselves opposed, but to a union of church and state in the popular sense of the phrase, a union not of one church but of all the churches recognized as orthodox or evangelical, a union not giving the state power to elect church officers nor to take the oversight of church doctrines, but giving the churches the privilege of enforcing by civil laws, institutions, and usages of religion according to the faith of the churches, or to the construction put upon those institutions and usages by the churches. To such a union, we say, they are not opposed. They are essentially and practically, despite their professions, open advocates of a union of church and state. We are not alone in this view of the subject. Mr. G. A. Townsend, New World and Old, page 212, says, "Church and state has several times crept into American politics, as in the contentions over the Bible in the public schools, the anti-Catholic Party of 1844, etc. Our people have been wise enough heretofore to respect the clergy in all religious questions, and to entertain a wholesome jealousy of them in politics. The latest politico-theological movement is to insert the name of the deity in the Constitution." The Christian Union, January 1871, said, "If the proposed amendment is anything more than a bit of sentimental cant, it is to have a legal effect. It is to alter the status of the non-Christian citizen before the law. It is to affect the legal oaths and instruments, the matrimonial contracts, the sumptuary laws, etc., etc., of the country. This would be an outrage on natural right." The Janesville, Wisconsin, Gazette, at the close of an article on the proposed amendment, speaks thus of the effect of the movement, should it succeed. But, independent of the question as to what extent we are a Christian nation, it may well be doubted whether, if the gentlemen who are agitating this question should succeed, they would not do society a very great injury. Such measures are but the initiatory steps which ultimately lead to restrictions of religious freedom, and to commit the government to measures which are as foreign to its powers and purposes as would be its action if it should undertake to determine a disputed question of theology. The Weekly Alta Californian of San Francisco, March 12, 1870, said, "The parties who have been recently holding a convention for the somewhat novel purpose of procuring an amendment to the Constitution of the United States recognizing the deity, do not fairly state the case when they assert that it is the right of a Christian people to govern themselves in a Christian manner. If we are not governing ourselves in a Christian manner, how shall the doings of our government be designated? The fact is that the movement is one to bring about in this country that union of church and state which all other nations are trying to dissolve." The Champlain Journal, speaking of incorporating the religious principle into the Constitution and its effect upon the Jews, said, "However slight, it is the entering wedge of church and state. If we may cut off ever so few persons from the right of citizenship on account of difference of religious belief, then with equal justice and propriety may a majority at any time dictate the adoption of still further articles of belief, until our Constitution is but a textbook of a sect, beneath whose tyrannical sway all liberty of religious opinion will be crushed." Petitions and remonstrances are both being circulated with activity, and shrewd observers who have watched the movement with a jealous eye and heretofore hoped it would amount to nothing, now confess that it is formidable. No movement of equal magnitude of purpose has ever sprung up and become strong, and secured favor so rapidly as this. Indeed, none of equal magnitude has ever been sprung upon the American mind, as this aims to remodel the whole framework of our government and give to it a strong religious cast, a thing which the framers of our Constitution were careful to exclude from it. They not only ask that the Bible, God, and Christ shall be recognized in the Constitution, but that it shall indicate this as a Christian nation and place all Christian laws, institutions, and usages of the government on an undeniable legal basis in the fundamental law of the nation. Of course, appropriate legislation will be required to carry such amendments into effect, and somebody will have to decide what are Christian laws and institutions. From what we learn of such movements in the past in other countries, and of the temper of the churches of this country, and of human nature when it has power suddenly conferred upon it, we look for no good from this movement. From a lengthy article in the Lansing, Michigan, State Republican in reference to the Cincinnati Convention, held in 1872, we take the following extract. "Now there are hundreds and thousands of moral and professedly Christian people in this nation today who do not recognize the doctrine of the Trinity, do not recognize Jesus Christ the same as God, and there are hundreds and thousands of men and women who do not recognize the Bible as the revelation of God. The attempt to make any such amendment to the Constitution would be regarded by a large minority, perhaps a majority, of our nation as a palpable violation of liberty of conscience. Thousands of men, if called upon to vote for such an amendment, would hesitate to vote against God, although they might not believe that the amendment is necessary or that it is right, and such men would either vote affirmatively or not at all. In every case, such an amendment would be likely to receive an affirmative vote, which would by no means indicate the true sentiment of the people. And the same rule would hold good in relation to the adoption of such an amendment by Congress or by the legislatures of 3/4 of the states. Men who make politics a trade would hesitate to record their names against the proposed constitutional amendment, advocated by the leaders of the great religious denominations of the land, and endorsed by such men as Bishop Simpson, Bishop McIlvaine, Bishop Eastburn, President Finney, Professor Lewis, Professor Seeley, Bishop Huntington, Bishop Kerfoot, Dr. Patterson, Dr. Kyler, and many other divines who are the representative men of their respective denominations. Among the first bills to be presented to the United States Congress on its assembling in December 1895 was this same religious amendment of the Constitution. This shows the unmitigated persistence with which this matter is to be pressed. Not only the representative men of the churches are pledged to this movement, but governors, judges, and many of the most eminent men of the land are working for it. Who doubts the power of the representative men of the denominations to rally the strength of their denominations to sustain this work at their call? We utter no prophecy of the future. It is not needed. Events transpire in these days faster than our minds are prepared to grasp them. Let us heed the admonition to watch and, with reliance upon God, prepare for those things which are coming on the earth. But it may be asked how the Sunday question is to be affected by the proposed constitutional amendment. Answer: the object, or to say the least, one object of this amendment, is to put the Sunday institution on a legal basis and compel its observance by the arm of the law. At the National Convention held in Philadelphia, January 18 and 19, 1871, the following resolution was among the first offered by the Business Committee. Resolved that, in view of the controlling power of the Constitution in shaping state as well as national policy, it is of immediate importance to public morals and to social order to secure such an amendment as will indicate that this is a Christian nation and place all Christian laws, institutions, and usages in our government on an undeniable legal basis in the fundamental law of the nation, especially those which secure a proper oath and which protect society against blasphemy, Sabbath breaking, and polygamy. By Sabbath breaking is meant nothing else but Sunday breaking. In a convention of the Friends of Sunday, assembled November 29, 1870 in New Concord, Ohio, one of the speakers is reported to have said, "The question of Sunday observance is closely connected with the national reform movement, for until the government comes to know God and honor His law, we need not expect to restrain Sabbath-breaking corporations." Here, again, the idea of the legal enforcement of Sunday observance stands foremost, and the same principle would apply equally to individuals. Once more, the Philadelphia Press of December 5, 1870, stated that some congressmen arrived in Washington by Sunday trains December 4th, on which the Christian statesman commented as follows. We give italics as we find them. 1. Not one of those men who thus violated the Sabbath is fit to hold any official position in a Christian nation. 2. The sin of these congressmen is a national sin because the nation hath not said to them in the Constitution, the supreme rule for our public servants, "We charge you to serve us in accordance with the higher law of God." These Sabbath-breaking railroads, moreover, are corporations created by the state and amenable to it. The state is responsible to God for the conduct of these creatures which it calls into being. It is bound, therefore, to restrain them from this as from other crimes, and any violation of the Sabbath by any corporation should work immediate forfeiture of its charter. And the Constitution of the United States, with which all state legislation is required to be in harmony, should be of such a character as to prevent any state from tolerating such infractions of fundamental moral law. 3. Give us in the national Constitution the simple acknowledgement of the law of God as the supreme law of nations, and all the results indicated in this note will ultimately be secured. Let no one say that the movement does not contemplate sufficiently practical ends. No less significant is the fact that the Sunday agitation is appearing in other countries simultaneously with the Sunday movement in America. Who can explain the fact that Sunday seems everywhere coming to the front, except on the ground that we have reached the time pointed out in prophecy when such a movement should be seen? The Chester, England, Chronicle of July 9, 1881, reported a meeting of 3,000 persons in Liverpool in favor of closing all public houses on Sunday. The Christian Statesman of July 22, 1880, gave information from England to the effect that a working man's Lord's Day Rest Association had been formed there, and that two of England's prime ministers, Beaconsfield and Gladstone, had given their voice against the opening of museums, etc., on Sunday. The same policy is enforced by some, at least, of the English in their dependencies. One of the first acts of the Marquis of Ripon, who was made Viceroy of India in 1880, was, according to the Christian Weekly, to issue an order forbidding official work of any kind on Sunday. In France, the question is also agitated. The Senate having occasion to consider some proposed changes in the Sunday laws, an eminent senator, M. Barthélemy Saint-Hilaire, according to the French journal Le Christianisme of June 11, 1880, opened the eyes of his hearers by clear argument showing that the seventh day, and not the first day, is the Sabbath of the Bible. In Switzerland and Germany also, this question is before the people. In the latter country, according to the New York Independent, a meeting was held a few years ago, numbering some 5,000 persons to encourage a more strict observance of Sunday. Many of these were socialists. Austria also shares in the general movement. A New York paper, in January 1883, published this item. A telegram from Vienna, Austria, says, "A meeting of 3,000 workmen was held today, at which a resolution was passed protesting against Sunday work. A resolution was also passed in favor of legal prohibition of newspaper and other work on that day. There is a local Sabbath Sunday committee in many of the great cities, and an international Sabbath Sunday association to secure the cooperation of other nations. This association has its headquarters in Washington, D.C. Another organization called the American Sabbath Union has come into existence to forward the movement in behalf of Sunday observance, and other reform organizations have swung into the same line. Notable among these is the Woman's Christian Temperance Union, which has great strength in the United States and many auxiliaries in other lands as well. This organization, having at first in view the one specific object of temperance reform, has now added to its declared intention the enthroning of Christ in American politics in order to secure, in this land, a theocracy and the better observance of the Sunday. In this theocracy, of course, if established, theological leaders would be the interpreters of Christ's will, and their decisions be enforced upon the people by the civil law. And what would this be but the papacy over again, well called in the prophecy, an image of that beast? What these national reformers desire and design to secure in their campaign is expressed by one of the secretaries of said association, J.M. Foster, in the Christian Statesman, October 1892. He says, "But one danger lies in this. The church does not speak as a church. The American Sabbath Union has done a good work. The denominations have spoken. But the Christian organized church has not officially gone to Washington and spoken. The work there has been largely turned over to associations, but the voice of God, authoritative, official, is through His church. Should there not be joint action of the denominations in this? They should, it would appear, appoint a joint committee to speak for God, and properly and courageously done, there can follow but the very same results. Much is lost by the church failing officially to speak at the right time and in the right place. No association is clothed with this authority. They are individual and social, but the church is divine. She can and ought to utter the voice of God in the halls of Congress as an organized church." The italics are as we find them, but other declarations in the foregoing extract are equally deserving of emphasis. It may well be questioned whether any more arrogant and pompous words were uttered previous to the setting up of the papacy itself. What they complain that they lack, they of course intend to have. And look at the picture. The church, that is the different denominations, confederating on dogmas held in common and represented by a joint committee, a central authority, is divine, and woe unto all dissenters from the authority of a divine church. So said Rome in its palmiest days of dungeons, stakes, and blood. So she would say today had she the power. And so apostatized Protestantism will say when it gets the power. And this joint committee is to speak for God, utter the voice of God, a second vicegerent of the Most High now claimed as a monopoly by the Pope, and authoritatively and officially lay upon Congress the commands of God for it to perform. Such are the dark schemes for which these men are now working. Alas, that the realization of them should now stand as an attainable prospect before their eyes. Did ever Rome ask for more? And when these would-be spokesmen for God secure their object, will it not be, we still ask, Rome over again in a Protestant garb, a very image of the beast itself? Another most significant and alarming step toward the accomplishment of these evil designs is the position taken by the great Christian Endeavor movement, which has arisen to a membership of millions within a few years, and is a common channel through which all denominations can work. The political functions of this great body are centered in a Christian Citizenship League, which boasts that it will have branches in every state, county, city, village, and hamlet in the United States, and see to it that only Christian men are put into office. What remarkable conversions will then take place? How politicians will become Christians and the millennium hasten on. At the Great Christian Endeavor Convention, held in Boston, Massachusetts, July 10 through 15, 1895, W. H. Macmillan, as given in the published proceedings, page 19, said, "Here is a power that is going to wrest the control of affairs from the hands of political demagogues and place it in the hands of him who is king over all and rules the world in righteousness. Our political leaders have been counting the saloon vote, the illiterate vote, and the stay-at-home vote, and all other elements that have hitherto entered into their canvassings of probabilities, but they have not yet learned to count the Christian Endeavor vote. I want to serve notice on them now that the time is drawing near when they will discover that a political revolution has occurred, and they will be found coming home from Washington and our state capitals without a job." These sentiments were cheered to the echo in the convention, and it is not difficult to foresee the effect they will have, for they were intended for that class of men among whom they will do the most good, that is, the body of average politicians, who, when threatened with a boycott, become the most abject sycophants on the face of the earth. All this, however, would be of no avail if those who are really patriots at heart would awake to this danger before they find themselves committed to movements, the effects of which they did not foresee, and if the two houses of Congress would stand true to the Constitution which they are sworn to maintain. For this movement means nothing less than a subversion of that noble instrument. But alas, Congress has already turned its back on its sacred trust to fawn upon the church influence so rapidly rising. When the managers of the World's Fair of 1893 in Chicago asked Congress for an appropriation in their behalf, churchmen brought their influence to bear upon the national legislators and induced them to make it a condition of the gift that the gates of the fair be closed on Sunday. In carrying this point, a most remarkable scene occurred. A senator called for a Bible and caused the clerk to read the fourth commandment of the Decalogue, whereupon grave statesmen argued, and at length by vote decided, that the day enjoined by that commandment as the Sabbath is Sunday. This was legislating upon a religious question which the Constitution expressly forbids. See Amendment 1. It broke down the barriers against the union of church and state and opened the floodgates for all the evils that invariably accompany such a union. The religious amendment clergy hailed the event as a great triumph and openly boasted that they had Congress in their hands and could compel it to do their bidding. How far away, then, is that image, the coming of which the Scriptures have foretold? The outlines of every element necessary for its erection are clearly developed. All the agents sufficient for an assault upon the bulwarks of American liberty are being rapidly enrolled and drilled. The outposts have already been carried, and as these pages go to press, the leaders of this fatal revolution are again clamoring around the citadel of the nation's strength. It needs but another step to turn the nation entirely from its high commission as the conservator of the principles of the gospel. That is, to render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and unto God the things that are God's, and lead it to form and foster a religious tyranny which will fetter the consciences of men and crush out soul liberty among the people. And this tyranny will be as much more wicked than any that has gone before it, as men have now more light and the experience of all the past to guide them. Progress of the Sunday Law movement. What the practical working of these changes will be is already made apparent. On the statute books of most of the states of the American Union are found Sunday laws, and as the agitation in behalf of the seventh day increases, religious zealots are not slow to use these laws to put the machinery of persecution in operation. Observers of the seventh day manifest no defiance of these laws in laboring on Sunday, as the higher law of God gives them an unalienable right to do, and they studiously refrain from disturbing others, or in any way infringing upon their rights by boisterous or offensive labor. Yet it is construed to be disturbance if they are even seen anywhere at work, or even if it is known that they are at work anywhere, though unseen or unheard. If no other way appears for detection, they are searched out by ministers or church members, or the police acting under their direction. Then follow arrest, conviction, and penalty by fine, imprisonment, or the chain gang. Up to January 1, 1896, over 90 arrests of this kind had been made, some of them under circumstances of great oppression and cruelty. Fines and costs had been imposed to the amount of $2,269, and prisoners had served an aggregate of nearly 1,500 days in jail and chain gangs. And from the windows of some of these jails, these very seventh-day keepers, who were there confined in durance vile for not resting on Sunday, could behold on Sundays trainloads of workmen going to their labor, picnickers to their frolic, hunters to their game, and railroad cars to their traffic. But these, it is to be observed, were not keepers of the seventh day. National reformers years ago professed to smile at the apprehensions of those who keep the seventh day that their work would result in persecution. Now they only smile a little more grimly and call for stricter laws for the seventh-day people. Most of the state governments have in their constitutions or in their adopted Bill of Rights provisions guaranteeing the fullest religious liberty. And the inconsistency of legislating on religious questions under these circumstances is at once seen, while the treachery of oppressing people for opinion's sake in such states is keenly felt. Every conceivable invention is therefore resorted to make it appear that it is not religious persecution at all, but only the question of obedience to civil law. One of these inventions is that Sunday is only a civil institution, and its enforcement only a police regulation, a civil requirement necessary for the public good. But this is impossible, for everyone knows that Sunday in its origin, history, and very nature is a religious institution. No claims in its behalf would ever have been heard of but for its religious basis. Hence, any enactment to enforce it by pains and penalties is religious legislation and religious oppression. But if there is a law for it, should not that law be obeyed until repealed? Every law that does not trench upon the domain of conscience, if it becomes unacceptable to the people, should nevertheless be obeyed till it can be changed or repealed. But Sunday laws interfere with the conscience of the observer of another day, and for that reason cannot bear upon all alike. And no true Christian can make his obedience to God depend upon the permission of his fellow men. It may be said again, in a country like the United States, do not majorities rule? And must not their decisions be obeyed? And the answer again is yes, in everything but questions of conscience, but never there. Render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and unto God the things that are God's. Men may legislate to guard the mutual rights of all members of society, but no further, and in this they will never infringe upon the rights of anyone's conscience. For a good conscience, 1 Peter 3:21, will never invade the rights of others, like the polygamy of the Mormons or the human sacrifices of the heathen. The founders of the American Republic never intended that any trouble should arise through the laws of the land over any question of conscience, but they permitted the evil principle of religious laws to remain in their political structure, a principle sure to spring to life at the first opportunity. In the further development of religious truth, it is now found that these laws forbid men to render obedience to what the Bible requires of them, and thus conflict with their unalienable rights. Such laws, therefore, the Christian cannot regard, and the government, to be true to its professed principles, should wipe them off the statute books wherever found. But this the religio-political clergy will not permit, and the nation is doomed, for it will thus put itself in line with the religious despotisms of the past, and the cry will go up from God's suffering children, "It is time for thee, Lord, to work, for they have made void thy law." Psalms 119, 126. And this work is not confined to America. In Switzerland, by an iniquitous application of a so-called factory law in behalf of Sunday, the authorities have closed the large printing establishment of the Seventh-day Adventists. Although state troops drill and target practice is performed on Sunday, with all the accompaniments of such exercises in the campus immediately in front of the building. This has been repeated in London, where the office of a Seventh-day Adventist paper, The Present Truth, has been closed by the English authorities on the same grounds. While, according to the prophecy, the image can be looked for only in the United States, the worship of the beast will prevail in other countries also, for all the world is to wonder after the beast. Someone may now say, as you expect this movement to carry, you must look for a period of religious persecution in the United States. Nay, more, you must take the position that all the saints of God are to be put to death, for the image is to cause that all who will not worship it shall be killed. A period of persecution has been for about 50 years expected and predicted. It has now begun, and is thus demonstrating the correctness of the application of the prophecy as set forth in this work. But it does not by any means follow that all, and we do not think that even many will be put to death, though a decree to that effect will be promulgated. For, as the prophet elsewhere declares, God does not abandon his people to defeat in this dire conflict, but grants them a complete victory over the beast, his image, his mark, and the number of his name. Revelation 15:2. We further read respecting this earthly power that he causeth all to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads. Yet chapter 20:4 speaks of the people of God as those who do not receive the mark, nor worship the image. If then he could cause all to receive the mark, and yet all not actually receive it, in like manner his causing all to be put to death who will not worship the image, does not necessarily signify that their lives are actually to be taken. But how can this be? Answer: it evidently comes under that rule of interpretation, in accordance with which verbs of action sometimes signify merely the will and endeavor to do the action in question, and not the actual performance of the thing specified. The late George Bush, professor of Hebrew and Oriental literature in New York City University, makes this matter plain. In his notes on Exodus 7:11, he says, "It is a canon of interpretation of frequent use in the exposition of the sacred writings that verbs of action sometimes signify merely the will and endeavor to do the action in question. Thus in Ezekiel 24:13, I have purified thee, and thou was not purged. That is, I have endeavored, used means, been at pains to purify thee." John 5:44, "How can ye believe which receive honor one of another?" That is, endeavor to receive. Romans 2:4, "The goodness of God leadeth thee to repentance." That is, endeavors or tends to lead thee. Amos 9:3, "Though they be hid from my sight in the bottom of the sea," that is, though they aim to be hid. 1 Corinthians 10:33, "I please all men," that is, endeavor to please. Galatians 5:4, "Whosoever of you are justified by the law," that is, seek or endeavor to be justified. Psalm 69:4, "They that destroy me are mighty," that is, that endeavor to destroy me. English, that would destroy me. Acts 7:26, "And set them at one again," that is, wished and endeavored. English, would have set them. So, in the passage before us, he causes all to receive a mark, and all who will not worship the image to be killed. That is, he wills, purposes, and endeavors to do this. He makes such an enactment, passes such a law, but is not able to execute it. For God interposes in behalf of his people. And then those who have kept the word of Christ's patience are kept from falling in this hour of temptation, according to Revelation 3:10. Then those who have made God their refuge are kept from all evil, and no plague comes nigh their dwelling, according to Psalms 91:9, 10. Then all who are found written in the book are delivered, according to Daniel 12:1. And being victors over the beast and his image, they are redeemed from among men, and raise a song of triumph before the throne of God, according to Revelation 14:2, 4. The objector may further say, "You are altogether too credulous in supposing that the masses of our people, many of whom are either indifferent or wholly opposed to the claims of religion, can be so far brought to favor the religious observance of Sunday that a general law can be promulgated in its behalf." We answer, the prophecy must be fulfilled, and if the prophecy requires such a revolution, it will be accomplished. To receive the mark of the beast in the forehead is, we understand, to give the assent of the mind and judgment to his authority in the adoption of that institution which constitutes the mark. By parity of reasoning, to receive it in the hand would be to signify allegiance by some outward act. Verse 18, "Here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666, the number of his name." The number of the beast, says the prophecy, is the number of a man, and his number is 666, 666. This number, some attempt to find in the word Latinos, the Latin kingdom. Thus they make, by what rule we do not understand, L stand for 30, A for 1, T for 300, E for 5, I for 10, N for 50, O for 70, and S for 200, which numbers added together make 666. Deriving the number from the name in this manner must be regarded as rather conjectural than otherwise, seeing that names making just that number can be found to almost any extent. We think we discover, however, a serious objection to the name here suggested. The number, says the prophecy, is the number of a man, and if it is to be derived from a name or title, the natural conclusion would be that it must be the 580 name or title of some particular man. But in this, we have the name of a people or kingdom, not of a man, as the prophecy says. The most plausible expression we have seen suggested as containing the number of the beast is the title which the Pope takes to himself and allows others to apply to him. That title is this: Vicarius Filii Dei, Vicegerent of the Son of God. Taking the letters out of this title, which the Latins used as numerals, and giving them their numerical value, we have just 666. Thus we have V5, I1C 100, A and R not used as numerals, I1U, formerly the same as V, 5S and F not used as numerals, I1L 50, I1D 500, E not used as a numeral, I1. Adding these numbers together, we have just 666. This title, there is reason to believe, was formerly inscribed upon the Pope's crown. The following extract is from a work entitled The Reformation, bearing the date of 1832. Mrs. Adat Kama quote said, "Miss Emmons, I saw a very curious fact the other day. I have dwelt upon it much and will mention it. A person lately was witnessing a ceremony of the Romish Church. As the Pope passed him in procession, splendidly dressed in his pontifical robes, the gentleman's eye rested on these full, blazing letters in front of his mitre, Vicarius Filii Dei, the Vicar of the Son of God. His thoughts, with the rapidity of lightning, reverted to Revelation 13:18. "Will you turn to it?" said Mrs. A. Alice opened the New Testament and read, "Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. She paused, and Miss Emmons said, "He took out his pencil, and marking the numerical letters or the inscription on his tablet, it stood 666. Here we have indeed the number of a man, even the man of sin. And it is a little singular, perhaps providential, that he should select a title which shows the blasphemous character of the beast, and then cause it to be inscribed upon his mitre, as if to brand himself with the number 666. The foregoing extract doubtless refers to a particular pope on a particular occasion. Other popes might not wear the title emblazoned on the mitre as they're stated. But this does not affect the application at all, for the popes all assume to be the Vicar of Christ, see Standard Dictionary under Vicar, and the Latin words given above are the words which express that title in the form Vicar of the Son of God, and their numerical value is 666. Thus closes chapter 13, leaving the people of God with the powers of earth in deadly array against them, and the decrees of death and banishment from society upon them for their adherence to the truth. Spiritualism will be, at the time specified, performing its most imposing wonders, deceiving all the world except the elect. Matthew 24:24, 2 Thessalonians 2:8-12. This will be the hour of temptation or trial, which is to come as the closing test upon all the world, to try them that dwell upon the earth, as mentioned in Revelation 3:10. What is the issue of this conflict? This important inquiry is not left unanswered. The first 5 verses of the following chapter, which should have been numbered as a part of this, complete the chain of this prophecy and reveal the glorious triumph of the champions of the truth. Thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, or share with anyone you think might be willing to hear these precious truths. God bless.